Good late Thursday or late Friday meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, giving a look at that Doppler technology. I know we had some rain and storms around on that Thursday, even some severe warnings towards South Georgia, but you see the accent now toward those coastal waters here in the middle of the night. Now, toward areas and toward the Midwest and the North Central, kind of a different story though, as we have some storms right now going on at 1 a.m., 1:15 a.m. or so Central Time, and they're looking toward Iowa. You see around Des Moines, there's been a gust of hurricane force reported there in just the last little bit here, very recently, about, let's say 14 minutes ago, or let's do the other polygon here with the clicking. Okay, a little bit further back than that, probably almost 30 minutes ago, but 74-mile-an-hour gust there, Des Moines International Airport, so hurricane force gust, that getting us there right toward that lower portion there on that Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. Obviously not a tropical cyclone or anything like that, but pretty strong gusts middle of the night here in July. They can get severe weather in July up in Iowa. I know back there in 2018 they had a tornado emergency there even. There was a big tornado event there later in July 2018. But as we go ahead and kind of look at things here, we're going to go ahead and broaden the view a little more. You see a risk in play for that Friday in the yellow. That is a 2 out of 5 risk for severe weather, and that includes a tornado risk here, starting to ramp up a little bit here as we look toward parts of eastern Iowa and northern Illinois. We had a risk on that Thursday. On that Friday, we could have another one. Temperature's pretty warm here this time of night. It is July, but severe thunderstorm watch toward the west. Gotta stay tuned and pay attention there. Around Davenport and Rockford, Illinois, Chicago there. Some tornadoes not out of the question as we're looking there. And we also have a slight risk for the wind that goes back toward Kansas City. As you're looking toward southwestern Michigan, you even see Grand Rapids here under that risk, or at least right on the edge, South Bend, Indiana. And still some tornadoes could make their way in toward those areas. So we'll have to watch that. Tornado risk, the lower risk, that extend out towards, parts in the southwestern portion of the circle area toward the Kansas City region. So that's interesting to see. Just got to stay tuned there for the latest as we kind of bring it back to home. Those temperatures here at the local level, I mean, we had that rain around, it cooled things off. In some areas warmed back up like around Stark, but now sitting here toward eastern Bradford County where I'm at on my Davis weather station, 70 degrees actually. So it's cooled off a good little bit. That's not on this screen, but that's something I can look at is from right outside. And then as we kind of look here, 78 toward Tallahassee, as we're tracking things. So a lot warmer over there. I will go ahead and say that, heat index values out toward like Apalachicola there at 89 degrees, feeling like that here at this late hour. So that is intriguing for sure. As we're tracking in the last 12 hours for rainfall, you see some areas there. We had a flash flood warning. I know toward areas there northwest of Valdosta where we had to focus, where some areas got about 4 inches of rain. North of Brunswick, northwest of Brunswick, about 4 inches of rain as well. Some of the areas of Georgia definitely got that precip. That's where the bigger precip numbers were, and the storms were on that Thursday. But as we look west of Interstate 95, over 3 inches of rain there, northeast of Hastings. That's really adding up there. Kind of hit and miss. But as we look toward Volusia County, though, right now here at as we look at that clock here, we'll put that on the screen. It is 2:19 here, and you see we have that lightning there east of I-95 and a thunderstorm, a small thunderstorm here, even at this very late hour. It's not in our area, but kind of noteworthy. You see how warm the area is when you add the humidity into things. You're looking at those higher dew point values and the like. So you can see here few lightning strikes around Ponce Inlet to New Smyrna Beach, but that's not our area. But I just wanted to say that to you. Nobody else really getting anything in the vicinity, coastal waters, but that's not something we're worried about here toward those inland regions. Now let's go ahead and pull up here the graphics mode. We'll kind of pull that up and give you guys a look here at the situation. You do see flood warning versus flash flood warning. I keep reiterating this here. Flood warning, they're not going to set up the weather radios. They're more common. Flood advisory, same type of deal. But, flood warning is a little worse than flood advisory. Those are all up, they're all up from a flood watch there. But they can impact more flood-prone areas, but have a tendency to be longer in duration. But the flash flood warning, like what we had a week ago, almost the week anniversary coming up right now, your next few hours, that terrible situation towards central Texas, an unimaginable tragedy that not really many could have ever seen, anybody in the meteorology community ever could have seen coming to the level that it was. I mean, you can see how it happened in retrospect, but it took that turn for the worst. Just an awful situation. The numbers keep getting worse. I mean, you would hope the missing number would go down, and some would be found alive. Of course, some, sadly, based on, how you think about it with the math, would probably, unfortunately, be found dead. But we haven't really seen, the numbers go in the right direction at all. They keep getting worse. The number of fatalities goes up, and the number of additional missing goes up as well. It's unimaginable. I remember the Tuscaloosa 22 years ago, 2011, there was a huge number missing initially, and then there was still, I think, like 50 fatalities, which is terrible, and that was a horrible day. We had more fatalities than that across the region in a historic outbreak in 2011. But the point was, at least that number in Tuscaloosa went down for the missing. This number just keeps going up as they also keep finding bodies, that were not necessarily, there may be some double counting going on, don't get me wrong, but we should, never ever see both numbers going up like this. It's awful. I mean, this is, one of the worst tragedies here in meteorology in the 21st century, and it was not in a holiday weekend, Independence Day, and not that many people really, I mean, we talked about a risk. Well, this stuff is talked about. There's a risk, but there's a difference between a risk here, for those local people. They got to pay attention, folks. It's so sad that the message didn't get out. I mean, the Weather Service San Antonio, office there, that and Austin, San Antonio, it's a combined thing per se with the city names. But the point is, they tried really hard, and the message just didn't break through here. With the holiday coming up, it wasn't like, something that was obvious days and days out. It kind of developed last minute, but there was still enough flood watch the afternoon before to let people know, especially around a river, there could be some problem. Of course, we never could have seen something to this level coming, but it's just hard to wrap your head around it. Something this bad could happen, at least with Helene, as horrible as it was. There was at least, there was talk that it could be historic, even though we were focused on our local area more, there was talk by the Weather Service up there, historic, leading up to it. This could be something, even though maybe we didn't know exactly how to handle that, in toward the mountainous areas, because it's still hard to quantify. At least there was wording of historic. That wasn't really the case here leading up to this necessarily into towards central Texas, but we've seen other situations, that we see that it would look really bad coming in, a hurricane, a bad one, coastal areas, but folks are able to kind of mitigate ahead of time because they know the danger's coming. These ones here now, these situations where we don't really see the danger until it's too late to the level that it was, it's just mind-boggling. This is still happening in 2025. I don't know what to do. Nobody's to blame here. I'm just, it's hard to wrap your head around it that this happened here. With all the technology we have, and for a river to rise, and in the U.S. here, 120 people lose their life, and 173 more missing. Anyway, it's just awful. But with the radios, the phone alerts, maybe this didn't really get through there, or maybe folks had their phone do not disturb. With the radios, if you have it set on, the signal looked like it was pretty good. Then toward that region off the Kerrville transmitter, there toward Kirk County, and that would have been something that would have got folks to evacuate before the worst got there. It indicated more urgent concern. There was enough warning to activate those. I mean, that's what happened. They got activated a couple hours before the worst. And if, you took action, you heard, well, I'm by a river, I need to leave, it woke you up like those can and should because they're so loud. If you left, you probably would have been okay, but it's just the messaging just didn't get out for whatever reason. Folks didn't have weather radios probably. That's something that's not really, I mean, I remember I had the internet here 20 years ago, very young, weather radios. That's something, well, you can really, really rely on, but now it kind of is not top of mind anymore because some people have the internet, cell phones at the, with the information at the tip of their fingers, per se, just it's kind of awful, just and hard to wrap your head around it. a disaster like this happen. And I mean, the Guadalupe River coming up 25 feet or so, rapidly there, and depending on what port, and just getting all that water in there. I mean, it was 25 feet over flood stage, give or take, and that's a wall of water. It's like a tsunami pretty much coming in. Maybe a little slower than that, but quicker in some ways, and way, way, way more, unexpected per se than storm surge from a significant hurricane. So, people aren't evacuated and just come up on campsites, RVs, cabins, 25 feet of water, folks, 6 feet, give or take. I mean, you can even if somehow you could have 4 people, it didn't happen, but, if you could have 4 people all standing on top of each other, they would still be underwater if somehow all of them were able to not get, pushed by the water, which they would, because of course the water is so strong, I mean, it's just that much, in terms of the height, that it's hard to wrap your head around what happened there. I mean, and that so many folks were, in the life-ending situation. Thoughts and prayers out to everybody impacted there. It's just awful. Thoughts and prayers to everybody impacted. Let's go ahead and see those storm names. Kind of had some, and this one makes it a little bit weirder in some ways too. It had, ties to Barry there, which that's not something we're really looking at because it made landfall there beginning of the week last week as a tropical depression in Mexico. There really wasn't, much left. I remember seeing some moisture hanging around. It's a little odd, I guess, in retrospect. But again, it did, you have areas, if it would have got further there into Mexico, it would have broke up more. But it really wasn't apparent with the rain, and then all of a sudden interacting with another area, and the storms just blossomed there in the middle of the night. There was some modeling the night before showing that could happen, but it's not something that's not normally how you get that. I mean, it was not, directly from a tropical cyclone. It was indirectly from remnants, very, parts of remnants, not even the whole, thing. I mean, it was not being traded by the Hurricane Center in days. I mean, it's not like there were advisories on this. They stopped several days before. It's just a very odd situation. But Dexter's the next name on the list, and locally, I know you guys locally are watching and wondering what our forecast is. As terrible as things are out toward the west, we do have to get the local forecast some. I know it's a little cooler in some spots tonight, like Lake City, 68 degrees, which I'm looking on my other monitor and seeing, which is, great compared to 82 in Apalachicola, but, it's just, something that we'll, have to kind of hope for. And some of these nights, because we've got more humidity, more storms in the day, you probably have higher temperatures at night at points here. And there is at least a small chance here that we ultimately could end up seeing Dexter here toward the southeast in the next couple of weeks. I don't really want to, get into turning the logo red or anything like that yet, but we always have to pay attention. Probably not going to happen, exactly the way it's been sown. There was one model yesterday, one run, that was showing a flooded situation toward our area. So we have to, consider what happened in Texas, at least keep that in the back of our mind. That's a week from now. We'll see if it happens. We don't have the same type of, river setup they do. We've had 20 inches before here, and it's been generally over like a couple days. It still was bad, but you didn't have a river rise like what we had toward Texas and how those tragic consequences. As we go ahead and look here, tropical climatology still later on in the season when you really have to watch the forecaster for several hurricanes. Those first 3 there, as we were looking at the names, I mean, these were not hurricanes, even though Chantal was deadly toward North Carolina. Barry's remnants, really looking at the remnants. I mean, of course, Chantal, a handful, sadly, of folks who's in her life. Barry, the remnants, which, it might be enough to get it retired. We'll see, because Dora in the Pacific, it got retired. Central Pacific, after it influenced that, storm system there. That storm system influenced the wildfire with the strong winds toward Hawaii back in 2023, I believe it was. But it's a situation. None of these were hurricanes, but Chantal is deadly. Barry is more deadly, with the remnants very, far after. Again, this is very unusual situation, but hurricane season runs through the end of November, so you have to stay alert, obviously, as we watch things. And that rainfall forecast here, as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here, we're just gonna see that moisture starting to surge on in. Some is gonna get, even wetter here towards some of our different communities as we're tracking toward like Taylor-Dixie County. This is so on maybe 4 inches on average. So some spots a lot more. Other spots, maybe not achieving that there, but you see multiple inches toward parts of North Florida here on average. South toward a little less. We have quite a bit on that Thursday. So, but this is looking ahead for the next 7 days there, and then you see Central Florida, South Florida on average, a little bit more precip. Even you see some of those maybe 5-inch amounts. So they're going to get a lot down there. It looks like, Orlando and Lakeland, St. Cloud, Kissimmee, areas further down towards Southwest Florida, getting inland there of, the Fort Myers region could be even a little bit more soaked with things there. As we're looking and as we're tracking, we'll say, I know it's not that far inland, but maybe Punta Gorda or something. You never know. La Belle, places like those. So, interactiveRadarCloudWeather.com. You can get that there, cloudweather.com/radar. That's important. When we're not on, you can look at that, and you have covered area here. We're in Bradford as we're looking at things. We're always on for the 62 counties here, so just kind of important to keep tabs on things, not that we're expecting any, but we're always watching, tornado warning storms that pop up. We had a tornado warning around areas in the Savannah TV marker on that Thursday. A little bit of weak rotation in our area, but wasn't enough for a tornado warning. But Savannah area had a tornado warning. So here's your tornado safety tips here. Not expecting any tornado watches here anytime soon, unless we get a tropical system or something to really emerge within the next week, or a little bit more. But if there's a tornado warning, you want to seek such and such a sturdy building, get as many walls between you and the outside as possible. Protect yourself from flying debris by putting on a football helmet, bicycle helmet, or baseball helmet. So really important to keep in mind. Obviously, of course, if we're to get a tropical system, then that would increase that threat. But it's not a big threat right now at all. It's a very low, very isolated, very one-off type situation. So just something to kind of bear in mind, though, for sure, as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here in toward the weather center. So just always trying to keep tabs on everything for you guys. And that includes the drought monitor. Let me go ahead and pull that up now in our graphics system. You can see here, abnormally dry still, despite some of this rain we've been seeing for some of our viewers. Parts of Bradford, Alachua, parts of Duval, portions of St. John's and Flagler, and all of Clam Putnam, and then, getting to Marion, you actually have an area of severe drought. So, gotta get some more rain in some spots, but some areas are kind of getting tired of it. It is July. You expect rain, you just don't want that lightning or the severe weather that comes with it. Don't want too much too quick. That can lead to some flash flood warnings, but not in a terrible spot here. We were, looking worse earlier in the year with this. I mean, you don't want to be too wet either, so this isn't a terrible place to be. Now, it depends how the next couple months go. Do we, just see the normal storms and not really any tropical systems at all? Of course, we don't really want tropical systems, but then we don't really get that, and the calculations are probably starting to get us closer back to drought unless we have squall lines. But if we, see a lot of tropical systems, we could have, flooding concern, no drought, but, they were actually in bad drought there toward areas where they had the terrible flooding in Texas. And it went from a drought to a flood disaster, within hours. So it's a give and take for sure. I mean, they're more vulnerable because of the way the surface is. It's harder to get the water down, especially in a drought. And then, the river basin, it was a hill country type of region, the Texas hill country. And it's just unfair. They're going away. It happened, but in a way, I mean, when you think about it, there is, going back to 87, I think it is, there's history of some problems there, but they had a really bad flood. It was during the day, though, when some, fatalities happened. This was at night, holiday, everybody not paying attention. It was late at night. It wasn't like, some folks are still awake partying or whatever. This is really late where everybody is just fast asleep. I mean, on holiday, it didn't, I don't know, it's just, you can't get any worse than what happened there, really, in terms of all the events. I mean, there's so many things came together for it to be an absolute disaster. toward Texas. It's just hard to wrap your mind around because you don't think of something like that causing that many fatalities. I mean, this wasn't like it was a major hurricane coming in. This wasn't like Irma. I mean, or something like that. I mean, we're to the point. There's a lot of bad hurricanes, and bad tornadoes. Uh, a majority of them at this point. We didn't have as many fatalities as we did toward Texas did. I mean, by the time we're all said and done, I mean, it could be one of the deadliest events. I'll go back over to that graphic, and I'm not really supposed to keep talking about other stuff like that when we're on a different graphic and probably confusing for people that's tuning in, folks that's tuning in. But let's go back to that graphic here real quick about the flood situation. I mean, 120 people are dead, 173 more missing. It's just, just unfathomable. I mean, it's, meteorology and know about the impacts when you have a hurricane or a major one hitting population. You're going to have a number of fatalities, but, those numbers don't generally even get that close to this. I mean, it's just crazy. 120 dead and 173 additional missing. I mean, that's, what we're being told. I hope there's a lot of double counts here. And that number, and there's a lot of overlap. And then some folks that were missing aren't actually missing. They're alive. And we, because if we add all these together, if everybody that's been reported missing, ends up being found, it's hard to imagine, this far after, a week after that, many folks would just be so hard to find, after they were, lost their life in a flood. But if you add these together, we're approaching 300 people that lost their life. Hopefully we don't come close to that. I mean, 120 already is just terrific. So many children losing their lives, they're out towards Central Texas, the hill country. Just, they're going to always be known for this tragedy there as we look, toward that area. When you think about the Texas hill country, it's going to be something you always think about now. I mean, that tragedy in 87, it killed 10 people in a flood there. That was something that folks talked about. I didn't actually know about that, almost 40 years later, but it was a really big deal. And a lot of folks, still remember that. Now, talking about way, way more fatalities. This is going to be something, that's going to be a disaster talked about for generations. And it's just, unimaginable. One of the worst, situations in meteorological history when it's something that just is not really easy to foresee in some ways. As we go ahead and go back on over here to our source, real quick, you see that moisture offshore. See the temperature contrast here over land. And now here's that extended forecast. Hot temperatures and lightning can be dangerous. So use caution when outdoors at certain times. This, we expect this time of year. A little above average in the temperature still. It's going to be kind of toasty. It was steamy out there on that Thursday. Even when we weren't getting storms before the storms, it was steamy. And just drink plenty of water, take frequent breaks, and whenever thunder roars, sometimes you might be a little busy or something. But it is the best advice to go indoors because it can be deadly here, as those clouded run strikes could come into play. But you see 60% chance of rain Sunday through Thursday, so the rain should pick back up. Could have some tropical moisture. We'll see if anything develops tropically. Hopefully not. Temperature starting to drop as we have more cloud cover around and, try to maybe push this on out eventually. But we're going to have to watch the forecast. We'll have more updates here in the days to come. Next Tuesday's our next full update, late Tuesday, early Wednesday. We'll pop back in before then, obviously, here, if we need to, posting the alerts as warranted there on the different platforms as well. So that's going to do it. That's Facebook and Twitter/X. If we're not breaking in, we're posting those local alerts like we did on that Thursday for some of those South Georgia communities. No tornado warnings in our local area, so we didn't need to break in. The other alerts did not look quite enough to break in. They were close, some of them, but we're watching things, we're tracking. Stay tuned, stay safe. Have a great night. Try to have a great weekend out there, everybody. Enjoy things this summer, but you got to be careful here. Be careful at the beach. Sometimes there's currents can be around too, but if you're taking everything into consideration here with the weather hazards, it is summer, so just try to make the most of it and enjoy things.